Ingalls, Oklahoma. A place that catered to both travelers and outlaws, Ingalls has a history that is said to be worse than the shootout at the OK Corral. Ingalls was settled in 1889 after its location in an area called the Unassigned Lands. This was because the Creek and Seminole Indians ceded land back to the United States after the Civil War. Ingalls established a post office on January 22, 1890. It was named after a senator in Kansas, John J. Ingalls. During the 1890s, Ingalls saw its peak in population with 150 residents. In 1893, bloodshed changed the course of the town's history, which was known as the Battle of Ingalls. This resulted in the death of 3 U.S. Marshals and 2 civilians. Several people were wounded, including 2 outlaws, which resulted in 1 being captured. The story goes, several members of the outlaw gang, including Bill Doolin, Bill Dalton, George Red Buck Waitman, George Bitter Creek Newcomb, Charlie Pierce Arkansas Tom Jones, Tulsa Jack Blake, and Dynamite Dick Clifton, had taken refuge at the old hotel for some time. U.S. Marshals caught wind of this information and formed a posse that included 27 marshals and Indian police. The night before the ambush, they camped out on the Cimarron River, outside of Ingalls. A young boy was playing by the creek when he noticed the marshals. He immediately went back to the saloon and notified the outlaws of the impending ambush. Instead of making a run for it, the outlaws saddled their horses in preparation for an escape, but returned to the saloon for a night of drinking and gambling. The next morning, Bitter Creek Newcomb had left the saloon and, when mounting his horse, was fired upon by the posse. Newcomb was wounded but managed to take cover behind a building. Immediately following the first shots, Arkansas Tom Jones, who was sick in bed at the OK Hotel, returned the fire from his second-story window, mortally wounding U.S. Deputy Marshal Thomas Houston. This was the start of a full-out gunfight. The outlaws left the saloon, guns blazing, and had made their way to the nearby stable. Red Buck, Bill Dalton, and Tulsa Jack Blake then mounted their horses and came out of the stable still firing at the marshals. Then, as Deputy Lafayette Shadley was shooting at Bill Dalton, he struck the outlaw's horse, which collapsed to the ground. Dalton returned fire and struck Shadley several times. At this point, Bill Doolin had shot and killed Deputy Marshal Richard Speed. During the shooting frenzy, an innocent bystander named Young Simmons was also killed when he tried to take cover inside Vaughn's saloon. Another citizen, known only as Old Man Ramson, was also hit in the leg but survived. Saloon bartender, Mr. Murray, who obviously was an ally of the outlaw gang, fired on the deputies from his front doorway. He was shot in the ribs and the arm and survived but was arrested. All the outlaws had escaped, except for Arkansas Tom Jones, who was trapped in the hotel room when Deputy Marshal Jim Masterson threatened to throw dynamite into his hiding place. Following the Battle of Ingalls, U.S. Deputy Marshal Thomas Houston died the following day from his injuries, and Deputy Lafayette Shadley died 2 days later following his injuries. This event would spark the Doolin-Dalton gang to leave Oklahoma and head for Kansas. Eventually, the marshals caught up to them, and they made a final stand in Kansas a few years later. The town of Ingalls shortly after had dwindled in population, and the post office was closed by 1907. Ingalls is located 9 miles from Stillwater, and its population rebounded to 150 residents over the years. All that remains is the original saloon, general store, and stable. The hotel had been destroyed, but a replica was built in its place. Plaques and memorials outline the history of this battle and show dedication to the lawmen who made the ultimate sacrifice. If you are headed to Stillwater, be sure to make the detour and see this historical side of Oklahoma's history.